Silvercrow.
Welcome to the Urban Witch Podcast, where modern magic meets ancient wisdom. Join us as we uncover the truth about witchcraft and help you embrace your inner witch. On today's episode, we'll be looking at which witch is which and helping you decide whether it's even worth putting yourself in a category. Stay tuned. In our last episode, we talked about what it is to be a witch. But off the back of that, there's a lot of different types of witches. And really, I guess there's the question of, do we really need to have a label? Do we need to give ourselves a type or a label? And really, it depends on your practice. I think as humans, we have a tendency to try to keep things in categories and in boxes. There's a tendency to try to place things into names and to give a face to anything, really. We always tend to like to place things in boxes all the time. And so I think really for the type of witchcraft, which witch is which, essentially, it's often helpful for some people to give themselves a label. I would class myself as a green urban witch, but really it doesn't really matter, whether you have labels or whether you don't. It's irrelevant, really. But it often helps people to focus it helps to focus your practice and focus your type of disciplines that you study or that you focus on. It helps to give them a direction, a sense of direction, and a sense of belonging in that aspect. So really, for the types of witches, if you imagine witchcraft as a whole as kind of like a giant tree, and off that tree there's various different branches that span off in all different directions, all gnarly branches spanning off everywhere, and each branch is a different type of witch. And that could be anything from, there's green witches and hedge witches and kitchen witches and eclectic witches and white witches and so on and so on and so on. And there's lots. And there's probably all in all around about 50 types. And then there are kind of amalgamations between several types that are sort of interwoven. Lots of us will pull on different disciplines, pull on different types of witchcraft and incorporate it into our own practice. Mostly the types of witches that we see are, you have the sort of labels given, and they tend to describe the sort of type of practice and the focus point of the practice. And one of those types of witchcraft, for me, for an example, is as a green witch. Green witchcraft is predominantly nature-based. It's around sort of herbal magic, and it's also based around herb lore. And herb lore is kind of the seeing and studying of plants in not just for their medicinal qualities. Herbalism is more kind of the medicinal qualities of plants. But whereas herb lore goes a bit more than that, it's the medicinal qualities, but it's also the magical qualities. It's connections and associations in folklore. And also it's about seeing the plants as beings in and of themselves. We tend to see plants and trees as their own being. They're not just things to be exploited by us. They are beings in and of themselves, with their own ways of being, their own personality traits, their own ways of sensing energy and utilizing energy. And so herb lore kind of goes a bit more in depth into that. And as far as kind of the other sort of branches that go off, often there's crossovers, as I said, but there's also like a state, you can get confused about the names that are given. So terms like hedge witch is one that gets confused quite a lot. And hedge witches tend to get lumbered into with, green witches and hedge witches tend to get sort of used and lumbered in together. And they're not, the practices aren't exactly the same. Yes, a lot of our practices kind of are similar, and we'll sort of jump in and out of each other's, I guess, but But really, a hedge witch, the whole notion of a hedge is not to do with kind of hedgerows specifically, hedgerows and herbs. It's not specifically to do with that. The concept of the hedge is all about the hedge is a metaphor for the border between the land of the living and the land of spirit. And so it's the border between, kind of the veil, if is another term that we kind of know of, that, you know, at this time of year we call it the thinning of the veil. And the veil is essentially the hedge. You know, that is kind of how it's termed for a hedge witch. And so there's the riding of a hedge is kind of the sitting on between worlds. So there's a lot of stuff to do with ancestors, to do with spirits and spirit guides and so on. And so that's kind of a hedge witch. They're sort of predominantly connected to spirit in that way. A green witch, as I said before, you know, we're someone who goes, and we are very deeply connected to nature. We follow the cycles and seasons of nature. We connect with the natural energies, with plants and plant-based magic, and plant medicine and so on. But also it's about balance. It's about the connection between and the balance between ourselves and the balance between the natural world, and how we kind of manage that balance accordingly. You know, we see ourselves as not just part of nature, but as nature itself. You know, we are one and the same. And, you know, we often have a tendency to think that nature is something that's outside and then we're inside, but it's not really the case. Nature is us. You know, we are it and it is us. We are all one and the same. And our nature is connected intrinsically to nature as a whole and to all other beings. And so it's about sort of honoring that, acknowledging that, I guess, and working in that way. And then we have, you know, kitchen witches. Kitchen witches is, again, you know, a lot of other witches will use kitchen witchery because it's something that's quite accessible for most people. You know, we're able to utilize herbs and magic within food. And so kitchen witchery is often about preparing and cooking magic into food, and baking it into breads and cakes and things like that. So there's the aspect of consuming within kitchen witchcraft. You know, there is the aspect of taking inward of magic, and that, whether that's for the self or whether it's for other people. You know, if you bake into a bread, for instance, a type of bread where you can bake your magic, your spell into the type of bread, and then eating the spell is the thing that activates the spell. It's the kind of taking inward of the spell. But it can be used in all different kinds of ways. You know, kitchen witchery is used in a variety of ways, and it's a really accessible type of magic, I guess, for most people. And then as you go forward, you have things like you know, lunar witches, who obviously work their magic around the moon. You have solar witches who work the magic around the sun. There is eclectic witches, which is a bit of an amalgamation of all kinds, really. They tend to pull in disciplines from all different types of witches. There are Dianic witches, which are predominantly to do with anything of the feminine. So, you know, the feminine being. So Dianic witches tend to be all very much into feminism and the intricacies of the female being in that way. And then onward and onward you go, and you can get quite deep. There's ancestral witches, kind of sometimes called ancestral, sometimes called hereditary, and as the name suggests, they are very deeply connected to ancestors, to, you know, studying genealogy and family trees and that kind of thing, and working with ancestral magic, working with the ancestors, calling in the ancestors, and that type of practice. And then as you know, and this is just kind of basic sort of witchcraft terms, I guess. As you move into different cultures and different parts of the world, then you'll get all kinds of different branches within branches off that as well. You know, there'll be similarities with certain branches of Western witchcraft, but there'll be vast differences as well. You know, as you get into sort of Asian and African culture, the differences are quite stark, and Slavic traditions can be quite different as well. So, you know, depending on where you are in the world will depend on what type of witch you decide to become. And really, there's not really a right or wrong with that. You know, there isn't a right or wrong of the types of witches that you want to become, or how you go about your practice, really. It's all about what you feel comfortable doing, you know, and practice how and when you feel. I think there's a big tendency, especially when you're first coming into the craft, to start to feel as though you have to practice every day. And really, the whole idea of what practice actually is different to lots of people as well. You know, the practice aspect of witchcraft, some people tend to see it as a kind of a chore. It can be, you know, some people, it starts to become a chore because people are, you know, worried that they're missing a day of practice, they're missing a day of writing into their grimoire or into their book of shadows, or they're missing a day where they're doing a spell or whatever it is, or they miss a full moon. You know, all of those things, it doesn't matter. You know, you practice to suit your life, and the idea is that you practice around your life. It's you should be the center of your practice, and how you manage that is entirely up to you. There's nobody that should say this is how it should be done. You know, there'll be lots of people that may try to say this is how it should be done, but that's nonsense. You know, it's the very nature of witchcraft practice is that there is no dogma. There's no doctrine. There's no dogma. There's no kind of organized textbook. You know, there's no witch's Bible, essentially. There is just your practice and how you wish to do that practice and what it means to you. And, you know, as you go further forward, there's the notion of kind of white witches and dark witches. But really, the whole concept of white and dark and white and black magic and things like that is another irrelevance, really. You know, magic is magic. And whether you practice light magic, white magic, or black magic or dark magic, there are no colors within magic. You know, witchcraft is witchcraft, magic is magic. And how you practice that magic is down to you. And so you start to see that the whole, I guess the whole question of which are you becomes quite a difficult one to answer, because you can pull on lots of different types of witchcraft and lots of different practice, and you can pull it in from all over the place. There's no set prescribed way of being a witch, really. You know, if you had ancestral roots in Spanish ancestral roots, for instance, you could pull in some of the Spanish types of witchcraft. You know, the bruja from Spain, and bring in sort of types of various different types of Spanish practice into that sort of makes you feel part of that of that ancestral connection, I guess. So it doesn't really matter. How you practice is deeply personal to each witch, and no two witches are the same. Even two green witches or two eclectic witches or two hedge witches or whatever, you know, no two witches are the same, and each witch's practice will be uniquely individual to that witch. The things we use, the tools we use, the words we say, the way we go about our practice, it will be different. So there's no real standardization of what witchcraft is, and that's because it's not a religion. There's not a doctrine. There's no dogma. So you're free to practice however you want to practice. And the majority of witches are very, you know, closely connected to nature. The majority are very much grounded in spirit and interested in ancestry and so on and so on. So you do get these kind of intertwining of disciplines, but really there is no prescribed way. And so as it comes to when we sort of try to answer the question of which are you, or which would you like to be, it's less about the specifics of them, I guess. It's less about the specifics of what witches there are out there, but it's more about where you feel called to and feel drawn to. If you have a specific passion for something, you know, perhaps your passion is for being in the woods, or you know, you perhaps love it by the sea. You know, if you love spending time by the sea and you feel at home by the sea, then perhaps, you know, a sea witch can be, you know, a good practice for that. And a sea witch would use items and energies of the sea and by the sea. So items such as shells and sand and driftwood and seaweed and things that are associated with the sea within their magic. And equally, you could get witches who, you know, you could be a mountain witch, you know, and you utilize the things that are within the mountains. And so again, urban witch, you know, an urban witch utilizes the environment that we're in. You know, I'm a green witch, but I'm also an urban witch. I live in the city, and so I utilize herbs and plants that I find growing and forage within the city environment. You know, there's so much that you can find within cities. You find herbs and things growing out of pavements and cracks in walls, and they're so easy to find and work with. And so it's just about honing your practice to the things that you are passionate about, the ways of life you want to have. It's about kind of projecting the way of life that you want to have, and then taking the steps in order to sort of incorporate all of that into your practice. So I guess that's really where it needs to be. I think that's the important part of it. I think that's the nature of where witchcraft practice needs to be, and it should be whatever you deem it to be. So don't get too caught up on the names. Don't get too caught up on the which are you. I think those kind of umbrella terms, sort of the witchcraft, I guess, is the umbrella term, and then these sort of little subcategories like green witch and urban witch and hedge witch and kitchen witch and eclectic witch and sea witch and all of those things. Really, I don't. Sometimes they are quite useful. I guess they're quite useful to help us focus our interests or identify with a variety of witchcraft. But really, don't get too caught up on them. What's more important is what sings to your soul. What is it that makes you happy? What is it that makes you feel at home and balanced and grounded and connected to spirit? You know, what are the things that make you feel that way? It may be that you're someone who loves to I don't know, walk across deserts. You know, there's practices that you could possibly do in sort of hot desert-like places. There's you could be someone who is kind of fascinated with the balance between life and death, and that would be classed as a grey witch. You know, grey witches they tend to be connected to the whole balance between kind of light and dark, chaos and order, and you know, the opposites and the polarizations, the polar opposites of life, and particularly, you know, light and white and black magic, and sort of the balance between the two. So, you know, you do have all of these kinds of varieties, and I guess they're all kind of a loose guide. They're not there to sort of say you have to be one of these, because you really don't have to be any of them. You don't have to choose a category specifically. But you can, and you can if you want, and it can help you to sort of guide you into, give you something to sort of tether your practice to. So I hope that's helped really, and I hope it kind of gives you a bit of an insight into what some of these terms that are banded around quite often are. And as you go forward, you'll start to see that there are potentially hundreds of types of witches or types of magical practice, from shamanism to druidism, to hermetic witchcraft and Kabbalistic and so on. And there's so much out there. But don't let it overwhelm you. Just try and take your time and see what resonates for you. See what you feel connected to the most. Figure out what it is that makes you light up inside, and then head towards that. If you love spending time in the forest, then let the forest be your church, essentially. If you love spending time at the sea, let the sea guide you as well. And just sort of lean into the things that fulfill you in life, and you can't go far wrong with that. Thanks for joining us today on the Urban Witch Podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and check out silvercrow.uk. That's our brilliant website. And also you can follow us online at Silvercrow UK on Facebook, Instagram, and X. So please do follow us, take a look at what else we've got going on, and look out for the next episode. In the meantime, stay wild, stay wise, and keep the magic alive. Take care all.